Good, very early morning, YouTube world. It is Gordon Causey, as always. And as always, Candy the Wonder Pup, who doesn't know what's going on in the world. She lives a very happy life. Yes, you do. What do you want? Well, we know what you want. If you're new to this channel, I start out, no matter what the topic is, whether I'm telling a joke or talking about something serious like tonight, she gets a treat. So now she's attacking me. Give me a paw. Lay down. Speak. All right, come on up. There you go. I think people tune into some of my videos just to see Candy. I've said it often on that this is a miserable, pathetic little YouTube channel. No ads showing up. No production value, just me sitting at a dining table in small town Brighton, Ontario, southeastern Ontario, little tiny town dot on the map. And want to talk about what's taking place in Israel. But before I do, likes are always appreciated. Subscriptions are appreciated. I'm like anyone. That little endorphin or dopamine or whatever that little chemical drug in the brain is, that little happiness that you get from engagement. Guilty as charged. I enjoy it just like everyone else, even on a miserable, pathetic, zero production value channel such as this, with not the being in rural Ontario, not the most robust internet connection. It's not bad, but it's not like what's available in major centers, major urban and suburban areas, but enough preamble. If you've been paying attention to the news the past few days, you know that there have been some significant developments in the situation unfolding in and around Israel. 2 or 3 days ago, Hezbollah, which is a proxy force of Iran, and which is centered primarily in Lebanon, which is to the north of Israel. They launched a drone into Israel, and it was able to penetrate quite deeply into Israeli territory, was able to capture footage of sensitive military areas around, I believe the city's name is Haifa, and apparently undetected. And Iran, I was reading a story from an Iranian news outlet that was trumpeting this successful drone mission as a demonstration of Israel's weakness, of the ability of Hezbollah to, reach right deep inside Israeli territory to capture this, these sensitive images. And then even more damning, if I can use that word, is something that was said by a gentleman by the name of Shaul, Shaul, not exactly sure how you pronounce it, Shaul Goldstein, who is the head of Israel's independent power company. I'll put it in the live chat, which is on. If anyone wants to comment while the video is live, the live chat is on. It's from the Jerusalem Post, and this is reported just June 20th, so just 2 days ago. If Nasrallah, and he is a senior or the senior ranking member with Hezbollah, if Nasrallah wants to take down Israel's power grid, he only needs to make a call, NOGA CO says. Jerusalem Post, June 20th. So let me scroll down. The CEO of NOGA, I don't know what that stands for, but it's Israel's independent system operator for their electrical system. Shaul Goldstein said there is no guarantee there will be electricity in Israel in the event of a future war with Hezbollah on Thursday at the Institute for National Security Studies conference in Sderot of these Hebrew names. Sderot, however it's pronounced. And it quotes him as saying, after 72 hours without electricity in Israel, living here will be impossible. We are not in a good state and unprepared for a real war, Goldstein said. He added that Hezbollah could easily take down Israel's power grid. If Nasrallah wants to take down Israel's power grid, he only needs to make a phone call to the person in charge of Beirut's power system, Beirut being Lebanon's capital, which looks exactly like Israel's. And he goes on to say he doesn't even need a drone. He can call a second-year electrical engineering student and ask where the most critical points in Israel are. Everything is on the internet. I won't say it here, but anyone who goes on the internet can find it, Goldstein said. And again, this is in the Jerusalem Post. And it quotes him further as saying, Israel is an energy island, and we need to supply ourselves. This is also our advantage. We are trained to work in isolation. When I took the position and began researching what the real threat to the electricity sector is, I asked, let's say a missile hits the electricity sector and there's a power outage for 1 hour, 3 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, and beyond. What happens to Israel in such a situation? The bottom line is that after 72 hours, it is impossible to live in Israel, Goldstein warned at the beginning of his remarks. He added, people do not understand how much our lives here depend on electricity. And it goes on to quote him, you check all our infrastructures, optical fires and ports, and I won't get into sensitive issues, but we are not in a good state, Goldstein warned. We are not ready for a real war. We live in a fantasy world, in my opinion. And then he added that Israel has invested a lot in protection in a joint effort with the electric company. And I'll end reading the article there. I'm going to provide the link in the live chat. See that article. If you want the link in the comment field down below, just ask. So there it is in the live chat. Let me make sure I've got the live chat so that I can see all messages. I see I have at least one person watching. You're welcome to chime in. That's one point. So, well, that's two. We have this drone that's been able to reach deep into Israeli territory, and we have the head of their independent power company openly speculating that Israel is not prepared for a war. And what this has gotten me to thinking is about the 1967 war, sometimes called the 6-Day War. That was a war. Israel, of course, came into existence, formally recognized by the UN. I think it was in May of 1949, after what is typically referred to as the First Arab-Israeli War, which lasted from May of 1948 until March of Mandated Palestine was invaded by 5 nations. I've mentioned it many times on this channel. The 5 invading nations were Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. And it was after that war that Israel established itself and was recognized by the UN. I believe the date was May 11th, 1949, was when the UN gave its recognition, and Israel was able to take its seat at the UN as a nation state. So not even 20 years after that, in 1967, there was yet another war. This time it involved Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. And I think it's instructive to look at that war and compare it to the current situation. Everything I've learned and read about that 1967 war shows me that the Israelis themselves were painting themselves as being in a very weak position. Israel's own media was reporting that the country was not ready to go to war, that it was in an incredibly fragile situation. Reporting from citizens at the time, and there's video coverage, the citizens of Israel, Israelis themselves, were very, very pessimistic and very worried and very anxious. And what happened was Egypt, with Nasser being their leader, at that time, the Arab world still did not recognize Israel's right to exist. And Egypt began mobilizing forces onto the shared border between Egypt and on their Sinai Peninsula and Israel. So they began mobilizing forces. Egypt expelled UN peacekeeping forces that were there to try and keep the peace, and the Egyptians expelled them. And at this time, again, the Israel's own news media was saying, we're not ready for this. And the citizens were incredibly pessimistic and worried. And then Nasser was threatening to block Israeli shipping in the region, controlling, the Suez Canal and ports of entry. Not exactly sure how to frame it, but he was going to blockade Israeli shipping. And it was at that point that Israel, and I'm not sure who, I think it was Ben Gurion was still the prime minister of Israel at the time, but I might be wrong. There's so much to know, so much to learn, so much information. You can only take so much in. But Israel, whoever the prime minister was, basically said that if you block Israeli shipping, that will be a casus belli. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. It is a Latin term. It's a cause for war. It's a declaration of war. If you blockade our shipping, we are going to take that as an open declaration of war. And Israel already knew war was coming. Egypt had mobilized troops. They were on the border between Israel and Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, and everyone knew war was coming. And I think it's very plausible that Egypt, it was emboldened by all the reporting coming out of Israel itself saying, oh, we're not ready for a war. We're in a weak position. We're not well enough trained, armed, funded to go up against our enemies. And so what happened was Egypt crossed the red line. They blocked Israeli shipping. And I think it was within hours, the Israeli Air Force launched a preemptive strike on Egypt's Air Force and basically decimated it, completely wiped it out before the planes could even get off the ground. They wiped out Egypt's Air Force, which at the time, the reporting I've seen, Egypt's Air Force was the largest in the Arab world, supplied by the Russians, or at that time it would have been the old Soviet Union. And so immediately they had air superiority. They also apparently, even before hitting the jets themselves, they were either before or simultaneously bombing all their airstrips, so that even if some planes were still operable, they wouldn't have had anywhere to take off or land from. And then after that, Jordan was allied with Egypt, and so after Israel attacked Egypt, which would be to the southwest, then they got attacked by Jordan to their west. So now they had a two-front war, and then eventually as well Syria to the northeast joined in. And if you don't know the history, after that war concluded, and it only lasted 6 days, and again, Israel was able within the first hours of the war to establish complete air superiority. They were able to capture from Egypt, they captured the Gaza Strip, because Egypt had gained control of that part of the former British mandate for Palestine during that 1948-49 war. Gaza was an Egyptian holding, it wasn't Palestine, it was part of Egypt. The Jordanians had captured the West Bank, and they didn't call it Palestine, they just added it to their country. And in those two territories, they expelled all the Jews. They engaged in ethnic cleansing, which apparently is now a war crime, but it wasn't back then, I guess, whatever the case. And from Syria, they captured the Golan Heights. And Jordan also captured East Jerusalem in the 1948-49 war, and then Israel took it in the 1967 war. That's past history, but in that 1967 war, Egypt, or rather not Egypt, but Israel had basically been signaling to the world, oh my gosh, we're not ready for a war, we're weak. Kind of echoing the statements being made by this gentleman, Shaul Goldstein, for the Israeli power company, their private electricity provider. Now, I did some reading, and there is a gentleman named Shaul Goldstein who has the same educational background as the Shaul Goldstein being reported in the Jerusalem Post, making these, rather pessimistic proclamations about Israel's prospects if it were to get into a major war with Hezbollah. Same name, same educational background. I do not know if it's the same person. Israel is not a big country. It's possible that there are two Shaul Goldsteins who both went to the same university. It's possible. However, the one I'm reading about with the same background was a member of the IDF and had attained the rank of major. I don't know if it's the same individual, but I do know that in Israel, most will be aware that military service is mandatory for both men and women. So the thought that, the idea that the head of Israel's electricity company, that he's a former senior ranking officer with the IDF, very possible. And the reason I bring that up is because of, you're going to go back even further in history. I think it's 2,500 or so years ago, maybe 3,000. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. If you're familiar with, many will be familiar with the book, will have at least heard of it. And what Sun Tzu wrote in something of a treatise on how to conduct warfare was that deception is the primary modus operandi. If you want to be successful militarily, you have to deceive your opponents. And he lays it out in a number of different fashions. This is before fighter jets were available and things of that nature. But what Sun Tzu said is, if you're far away from your enemy, you want to appear close. And if you're close, you want to appear far away. A little more problematic in today's era of drones and satellite imagery and such. But and he also said, when you're weak, you want to appear strong, and when you're strong, you want to appear weak. And this is where this is what I think is significant, because Israel appears to be signaling to Iran and its proxy forces, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis, seems to be signaling that we're weak. That drone being able to get so deeply into Israeli territory kind of sends the message to Iran and their proxy forces that, wow, we can reach right inside of Israel and send a reconnaissance drone and capture all kinds of wonderful images, and it wasn't detected or shot down. And I'm openly wondering, could they have shot it down? Could they have intercepted it and allowed it to perhaps give Iran and her proxy forces a false sense of security so that they'll be emboldened to attack? Open speculation. I look back on 1967 and the manner in which Israel signaled to Egypt and Egypt's allies that, hey, we're not in a position to fight right now. You have the head of the Israeli power company, the Shell Goldstein, who has the same name and educational background as a former mayor of a city in Israel, who was a major in the IDF. I don't know if they are one and the same persons, but again, in Israel, every male and female, both men and women, are required to fulfill military service, except, should be noted, except for the ultra-Orthodox, who are exempted from military service, although that may be changing. It's within Israel itself, there's quite a debate going on between the ultra-Orthodox communities and the government. Because Israel is a very tiny nation, and while their military is certainly very well funded, very well trained, very well equipped, they are not, the population of the country is very small. It's only 10 million. I don't even think it's 10 million people. And there's speculation that Hezbollah has somewhere in the neighborhood. The reporting I used to be saying over 200,000, but the reporting I'm seeing now is saying over 150,000 rockets that could be launched at Israel. That it would, in all likelihood, overwhelm this Iron Dome this missile defense system that Israel has. That it could be overwhelmed, and then, the power grid. Israel, a large part of its water supply is from desalination plants on in the Mediterranean. They take salt water from the Mediterranean, desalinate it, take the salt out, and it provides them with water for, I imagine, for everything from human consumption to cattle to agriculture, you name it. I think there are 3 major desalination plants, and if those were to be hit, taking out infrastructure, this would be a major escalation. But the question I'm asking is Israel almost inviting a strike? Because unfortunately for Israel, as the only Western truly democratic nation in the entire Middle East, they have to operate under something of a double standard. And it's not something of a double standard. They are expected to be perfect or darn near perfect, while their enemies do not face the same constraints. Their enemies can kidnap babies and hold them hostage, and that is forgiven. But if Israel goes into Hezbollah, and well, not Hezbollah, but Hamas in Gaza, hides behind the civilian population. They use their own civilian population as human shields, which, when you consider the fact of how severely outmanned, outgunned Hamas is, there is some logic to them using their civilian population as human shields. And it's a great way to win the PR war. Either A, Israel doesn't attack because it doesn't want to kill civilians, or it does, and civilians inevitably get killed, and then you can propagandize the death of civilians. But, how do you deal with an enemy that is so morally bankrupt that they kidnap babies and hold them hostage? But, that's what Hamas can do. Israel, if they're not perfect, they get criticized widely. And so there's some logic to Israel trying to, I think, provoke an attack so that because it must be remembered, Iran does not recognize Israel's right to exist. They want Israel wiped off the map. Hamas is own, this from the river to the sea. Hamas has a 1988 charter, or it's called the Covenant of Hamas. You can look it up. And it is their stated objective to wipe Israel off the map and to either kill all the Jews in Israel or to drive them all into the sea or to expel all of them and to completely take Israel over. And I assume at that point, Iran would probably look to take over the entire Middle East. I mean, it must be remembered that in that 1948-1949 war, after the British had abandoned their mandate for Palestine, that there was a free-for-all. There were the Jews living in the former mandate for Palestine, and they had to defend themselves against 5 invading nations. 5 nations sent armies, and though the Egyptians, Syrians, Lebanese, Jordanians, and Saudis, they were not looking to establish a Palestinian country. They were looking to add to their territory. And when Egypt captured the Gaza Strip, they didn't create a Palestinian country. They said, that's ours now. This is part of Egypt. When Jordan captured the West Bank and East Jerusalem, they said, this is ours now. The West Bank and East Jerusalem are Jordanian territory. It wasn't Palestine. It was Jordan's. And they they ethnically cleansed the Jews. And that was okay because they're not Western democratic countries. And let's face it, throughout human history, that's ethnic cleansing has been de rigueur after warfare. You conquer territory, to the victor go the spoils. If they wanted to get rid of all the Jews out of their newly conquered territory in the West Bank, that was their right. Jordan itself this should be remembered. Jordan itself is a Palestinian country. It was created out of the original mandate for Palestine. The mandate for Palestine was created in 1920 at something called the San Remo Conference. And all of present-day Israel and all of present-day Jordan were part of the mandate for Palestine. And then in 1921, a year after the mandate was formally established, Winston Churchill, Prime Minister of Great Britain, former Prime Minister of Great Britain, signed an edict, a declaration. He basically, at the stroke of a pen, took 77% of Britain's mandate for Palestine, and he created a Palestinian state. And it was given the name Transjordan. And it was a protectorate of Great Britain. And it remained so until I think the year was 1946, when Jordan, or Transjordan, gained its full independence, was no longer a protectorate. It gained its full independence from Britain, and then they changed the name from Transjordan to Jordan. Anyway, so that's, are we a couple weeks away? Are we days away? Are we hours away? I think right now, the situation, my genuine opinion, is that Israel wants to they know that Iran wants them wiped off the map. And I think they want Iran to unleash Hezbollah so that then Israel can finally do, rather than fighting a war of attrition, because every day rockets are being fired from Lebanon into northern Israel. There are in Galilee, which is the northern part of Israel, there are, I think it's 80 to 120,000 Israeli citizens who have had to vacate their homes. And so it's almost like a demilitarized zone, depopulated zone, because it's unlivable, because rockets keep coming across the border from Lebanon. And how long is this situation going to go on? It's been months that Israeli citizens living in this region bordering Lebanon have had to vacate their homes. I think Israel is more or less saying, let's go, but Israel is constrained because they can't do what Hamas did on October 7th. They can't just go and attack without provocation. And so the way I see it, I think it's very possible that Israel is making itself appear weak in the hopes of encouraging an attack from Hezbollah, which then, of course, would necessitate and would rationalize and justify a response. And then, and I've said this from the beginning of this conflict, if you want to go back to my videos back October 7th and in the days and weeks following, I have Tina Starry. Thank you. She says, this makes a lot of sense. It does to me. I have a military background. I'm a Canadian Forces veteran in communications, just to be clear. I was not in the infantry or the armored or the artillery. I wasn't in what they call the combat arms. I was a radio guy. Signals is the, although my title was kind of funny, they call it ACIS now, Army Communication Information System Specialist. You have to give fancy titles. Anyway, yeah. It does make a lot of sense if you look back at history, and if you've never read The Art of War, I highly recommend it. It's not just for war, and it's not, as a Christian, that's not my book. That's not my book. That's the book of the enemy. But it pays to know what the enemy is up to. It pays to know how the enemy operates. And unfortunately, if you're going to be successful in military endeavors, deception is key. At any rate, I'm going to work this morning. That's why I'm up so early. And I gotta leave in about 15, 20 minutes. So a little shorter than normal. Shorter is better. And again, you're welcome to like. You're welcome to subscribe to the channel. I've added a few. I've gotten up to in around 930, 940 now. The march to 1,000. Maybe I'll make it. Who knows? And who knows what can come of putting my voice out there into the public discourse. Always open for anything. Anyway, God bless. Today, Saturday the 22nd. Who knows, by the time I get home from work, this war may have escalated. Hopefully not, but I do think it's inevitable. You have a great day as well, Tina. Night now, or a good morning.